So much to the shock and surprise of literally anyone on planet Earth, Robert Smith and The Cure are officially coming out with a new album for the first time in 16 years. Woo! Robert Smith has been hyping up this album for literal years, and so it's really cool that we're actually going to be able to have new Cure music. So at the time of filming, it's only been a few days since the release date for the album has been announced, November 1st, so you know, mark it on your calendars, it's going to be awesome. And I had a thought a couple days ago that what I should do to celebrate this new album is I should go back and listen to all the old Cure stuff and talk about it on this channel. But the only problem with that is that I normally do a video a week, and The Cure have 13 studio albums, and so if I were to do a video on each album, then I would have to do 13 videos in 5 weeks roughly. And of course, that's in addition to the other videos that I'm already planning on doing. Long story short, I don't really know if that's doable, but I'm gonna try my best. And so with that, we begin our first official Cure-a-thon 2024. Woo! So the first album by The Cure is Three Imaginary Boys. It came out in 1979. And quite frankly, it's a very different version of The Cure than what you might be used to. This is a post-punk album in the absolute truest sense. It is an album that came out after punk. And so because of that, there's definitely a little bit of a punk influence on the album, but it is certainly not a punk album in the same way that the Clash or the Sex Pistols are punk. And I think that it's worth noting The Cure's connection to the Sex Pistols. You see, the Sex Pistols were a very big thing, you know, they kind of initiated the entire punk rock thing. And Robert Smith and the other members of The Cure attended Sex Pistols gigs along with people like Susie Sue and Billy Idol and several other British musicians of that time period. Or rather, I should say people who would become musicians, because they weren't really musicians yet. You know, it was the Sex Pistols gigs that triggered them to want to become musicians. And of course, there are a lot of other influences on The Cure, people like David Bowie and Jimi Hendrix. But really, if you look at the timing of it, The Cure are a post-punk band. They came out right after punk. And so the reason I'm telling you all this is because you kind of need to throw away your conception of what The Cure is before going into this album. This album has moments of atmosphere and of moodiness, but at the same time, it's not buried and drenched in those things like something like Pornography or 17 Seconds. And it has a lot of poppiness to it, but at the same time, it's not something that is a pop record in the same way as something like The Head on the Door. As I said, this is a very different version of The Cure than what you might first expect. They were young back then, they were 18 or 19-year-old dudes. And for better or worse, that's what the album sounds like, is it sounds like a bunch of older teenagers making music. And so because of that, the album is very enjoyable, I think it's very fun, and you know, there's a lot of bounciness to it. But at the same time, there are a lot of things on the album that are immature, which, you know, obviously, if the album is being made by 18-year-olds, obviously it's not going to sound mature like some of their later work. But certainly there are things on the album that are naive or maybe too goofy. Robert Smith has never been one to shy away from goofiness or silliness. I'm thinking of like the Love Cats or Doing the Unstuck, something like that. But it feels like the idea of what The Cure was supposed to be was not fully formed when this record came out. So despite the fact that this is in no way a goth rock record, I don't think it's a bad record. All in all, I think it's a pretty solid debut, and there are certainly worse debuts I've heard. There are better debuts, but there are also worse debuts. By definition, this album is a post-punk record, but at the same time, it's a very different kind of post-punk than what you might be used to, especially if you listen to a lot of more modern stuff. Typically, whenever someone tells me that a record is post-punk, I think of something that is cold and detached and drenched in reverb. I'm thinking of bands like The Soft Moon, or Have a Nice Life, or Molchat Doma. Unknown Pleasures came out the same year as this record. And both Unknown Pleasures and Three Imaginary Boys are post-punk records, but I think they're very different takes on the genre. As I've mentioned with Three Imaginary Boys, there's this kind of gleefulness or joy. There's a kind of bounciness to the songs and a kind of fun to the songs that a record like Closer doesn't have. And I would argue that the albums that came out immediately following this one by The Cure don't have that same fun. 17 Seconds is not a fun record. Faith is not a fun record. Pornography is not a fun record, very much not. And not only is it a fun record, I think that it's also a very relaxed record. It's a very kind of lazy record, and I don't mean to say that the writing is lazy. I mean, sometimes the writing is lazy, but what I mean by that is that I mean lazy in a good way. A lot of the album, not all of it, but a lot of it feels very loungy. There are a couple more laid-back tracks on this LP, like Another Day or Accuracy. Sorry, I don't look at my notes. I have notes right here. You can't see it. You can't. Oh, where's my arm going? Where's my arm? Where's my arm? Oh, my arm's going into the void. I have notes right here. But yeah, Another Day reminds me of that Arctic Monkeys record, Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino. That's it. I really like that record. A lot of people don't like that record, but I really like that record because it has a very relaxed feel to it, I think. And I think these songs have that same sort of vibe. So prior to filming this video, I've actually been very conflicted about how to approach it. And the reason why is because of the track listing of the album. You see, the track listing for Three Imaginary Boys was not chosen by Rubbersmith. It was not chosen by a member of the band, it was chosen by Chris Perry, who was the producer of the album. And you wouldn't think that the track listing would be a huge deal, but the problem is that it actually is. You see, the original release of Three Imaginary Boys, which is the one available on like Spotify and Apple Music and all those platforms. The problem with this track listing is that it leaves off some great freaking songs that easily would have been the best songs on the record. So for instance, Boys Don't Cry is one of The Cure's biggest songs, and in fact, whenever I saw them live, it's the song they ended the show with. But that song isn't on this record. Jumping Someone Else's Train, which is a classic, it's not on this record. It's on the deluxe edition, but it's not on the actual side A, side B physical LP. Jumping Someone Else's Train should be on here, but it's not. Killing an Arab should be on this album, but it's not. Killing an Arab was the first song that The Cure ever released. The title of it isn't racist, it's based off of The Stranger by Albert Camus. If you haven't read that book, by the way, then read it. The Stranger is freaking great. I was actually trying to find my copy earlier so that way I could hold it up to the camera and be like, "See guys, look, I have a copy of The Stranger," but I couldn't find it. And so I guess you'll just have to imagine me holding up a copy. So these singles are great. In my opinion, they all should have been included on the record. And if they hadn't been in any form whatsoever, then it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But the problem is that the year after this record came out, The Cure's record company released Boys Don't Cry, which is this weird thing because it was available in the US and it's a compilation but also redo of this first album in some ways. Whenever I say redo, I don't mean that they re-recorded anything because they didn't, but rather it can be seen as an alternate version of Three Imaginary Boys with a different track listing and different artwork. And so that album, Boys Don't Cry, it has Boys Don't Cry on there, and it has Jumping Someone Else's Train, and it has Killing an Arab. In other words, Boys Don't Cry features some of the best songs that were left off this version of the album, and so that's why I'm kind of conflicted and unsure of how to approach this album. And I considered only talking about Three Imaginary Boys and not mentioning the Boys Don't Cry US release, but the problem is that if I don't take into account the singles that were put out on the US version of the album, then the album is much lesser in my opinion. As I've said before, Boys Don't Cry, Jumping Someone Else's Train, Killing an Arab, I don't know what other songs were put on the Boys Don't Cry disc, but these are some of the best songs that The Cure had written up to this point. And I honestly just think it's so bizarre and strange that they wouldn't have included those songs on the original release. Especially whenever you look at some of the stuff that is included on the original release. So for instance, the original release, at the very start of side B on the vinyl record, you hear a cover of Foxy Lady by Jimi Hendrix. It's a faster version of Foxy Lady, and I get kind of the direction they were going for, but it's just not very good. And then whenever I was looking into it, it turns out that this song wasn't even supposed to be on the record at all. It was just like a sound check. It was just them messing around, and the producer saw it and was like, yeah, let's stick this on their record. And not only stick it on the record, make it the first song on side 2 of the record. And it's like, this, why? And so the band didn't want this song on there, but the producer stuck it on anyway. I think it's a bad move. So if you want a track-by-track breakdown of the original album, here it is. 10:15 Saturday Night is a banger. It's a very laid-back, toned-back song about feeling alone at home. Essentially, the narrator is waiting for the phone to ring and he's expecting to hear back from someone. It sounds like he's worried about his love. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. 10:15 Saturday Night is a banger. I already said that, but it's true. It's a banger. Accuracy is a fun track. The lyrics kind of feel meaningless in a lot of ways. And I will say that about this album is that the lyrics don't have the same weight as a lot of other Cure songs down the line. And I chalk it up to simple naivety and simple, them being teenagers trying to figure things out. Accuracy is a good one. Grinding Halt is one of the best, more poppy, upbeat songs on the record. There's a live version of it that they did in 2018 that I really like a lot. Another Day is a really atmospheric track. It kind of foreshadows 17 Seconds and Faith in a lot of ways. And whenever I'm talking about the record feeling lazy at times, this is a great example of that. And I think that's exactly the vibe that the song is going for. Just this idea that, there's another day ahead. It's going to be the same as this one. It's not going to be any different, whatever. Object is a more upbeat song. It feels like a parody of sexist songs. He's singing about how he views someone as an object, and that's it, only an object. And so there's no way that it's not a parody just because of the fact that it's so on the nose and in your face. No one who actually objectifies people would be saying that to them. No one who actually only sees people as objects would say, you're just an object. Robert Smith at one point said that it was his least favorite Cure song, but I don't think it's the worst song on this record. Subway Song is kind of a laid back, just very simple song. I like Subway Song, it's kind of nice, but the problem with it is that it doesn't have much staying power. And I think that's one thing you can say about a lot of the songs on this record is the fact that it feels like they don't have much staying power. There are certain songs that are absolutely phenomenal, but there aren't too many that stick with me after turning the record off. Foxy Lady we already talked about. It's kind of mid, as the kids would say. It's kind of mid. Meat Hook is a fun one, but at the same time, I don't really know what it's about. It's more upbeat, it's fun, I like it. I don't have much to say about it. So What, I think, kind of sucks. Lyrically, in terms of vocal delivery, So What is really in your face. It really does feel like you're listening to some punk, some teenage punk. So of the songs on the original album, this is the one that feels the most punkish. Fire in Cairo is a banger. It's very catchy. It's a very catchy pop song. I like it a lot. It's Not You is a song that I'm trying to remember how it goes and I can't. I was listening to it right before this and I just can't remember it at all. Obviously a standout track. Obviously, if I can't even remember it. I remember it's a faster one. Then Three Imaginary Boys, the title track, is a straight banger. It's very moody and atmospheric. It falls into the same category as 10:15 Saturday Night, although I do prefer Three Imaginary Boys. It's kind of slow and downbeat. It's kind of dreary. It's notable because of its guitar solo that comes in about 2/3 of the way through the song, and it's just so shrill and in your face, and it jump scared me the first time I heard it. By the way, there's a jump scare at the end of Subway Song, so I guess this album has a couple jump scares, so that's pretty cool. But Three Imaginary Boys is phenomenal. I love it. It might be my favorite song off this record. And then the final track on this album is The Weedy Burton, which is just kind of a fun way to end the album. It's just a brief, like 30 or 60-second instrumental. And so that's the original release of the album. As I said, I think it really would have benefited from songs like Boys Don't Cry, Jumping Someone Else's Train, Killing an Arab. There are some really cool demos and outtakes available from this era that I think would have made the album better. I'm Cold is really cool. There are two versions of it. There's a demo, which I don't think is sung by Robert Smith, and then there's a studio version of it. A lot of people actually prefer the demo, and it's very punky sounding. And then the studio version has a sort of weight and heaviness to it that I really love and appreciate. I think the bass tone is a lot heavier, and you have Susie Sue on backing vocals, but I do think that Robert Smith's vocals on the studio version of this song are a little too drenched in reverb. It's just a little too much for me. But this song is worth checking out. I Want to Be Old is really funny because, again, I don't think this is Robert Smith singing on this one. Maybe it is. But I Want to Be Old is great because he just sings about how he wants to be old. He wants to, like, lose his hair. And he wants to develop dementia, I guess. I don't know. It's just like such a funny song to me. I Want to Be Old. So it's worth checking out for a laugh. Do the Hansa is a lot of fun. It's very fun and silly. It foreshadows a lot of the zaniness that would come from later Cure songs. I'm thinking of like the Wish era. Thinking of Friday I'm in Love or Doing the Unstuck. But Do the Hansa is a lot of fun. It almost feels like a I don't know how but they found me kind of song. Like it just reminds me of that vibe. Heroin Face is noteworthy because it's a straightforward punk song. And I keep on saying that, I keep on referencing punk, but Heroin Face is like the most punk thing The Cure have ever recorded. On the deluxe edition of the album, there's a demo for a song called Cocktail Party. It's not really that special if I'm being completely honest, but I dig it. And then lastly, I wanted to mention the track Winter. Winter I think is a really sweet song. I think it's really nice. I think you probably could have chopped a verse off it to make it a little bit shorter, and I think that it probably should have been included on the album. It has that same lazy feel as songs like Another Day. But yeah, Winter sings about loss and it sings about winter, so I like it. That's why I like it, because I'm from Texas and it's like 100 degrees, even though it's officially autumn, and I hate the heat, and I love winter, so yeah. So really this is kind of a weird video just because of the fact that this is a weird album in The Cure's discography. It doesn't fit in with the rest of their discography, but in very subtle ways. The Cure typically have one foot in the pop world and one foot in the goth world, and so it feels weird to have a record that doesn't fall neatly into one of the two, though it's certainly more of a pop record than a goth record, because it's not a goth record in the slightest. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, there's like a vacuum and a fridge and a lamp. This is not a goth record. And then it's a weird record because I feel like there's not a lot to dive into lyrically. Boys Don't Cry is a great song because it's mocking that idea. It's mocking the idea that men shouldn't be emotional. Certainly Boys Don't Cry is not reinforcing that saying. Jumping Someone Else's Train, as I've said before, is a great song. There's a song also called Another Journey by Train that is available on the Join the Dots B-side collection. And that one's really good, I think. I think it's worth checking out. But really, yeah, this is a weird album to be talking about first. So at the end of each Cure video I do, I wanted to go ahead and rank the albums that I've talked about already. And this is actually my second Cure video. The first one I did on the Cure self-titled album from 2004. You see, if I say that I talked about their self-titled album I think 75 videos ago, it sounds like a long time ago, but really it's been, you know, a year and a half. But yeah, I made this video on their self-titled album a little over a year and a half ago, not quite 2 years ago. And so because of that, those are the only 2 albums by The Cure that I've talked about on this channel. So I am going to go ahead and say that I would rank Three Imaginary Boys above The Cure's self-titled album. I think this is a better record than their self-titled album, which it's not saying a whole lot. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think it's a whole lot better. So I like this album, but at the same time, it's certainly not my favorite Cure record. It's not even close to being my favorite Cure record. I think that almost everything they did after this album was better, though obviously there are exceptions, such as the self-titled record. So if you like this record, I would go ahead and recommend the early Susie and the Banshee stuff. It's very much in the same vein. I would recommend punk rock records. I would recommend The Clash. I like London Calling. I would actually recommend the first Arctic Monkeys record. It has a kind of nervous energy to it that reminds me a lot of this album. Their second record is great as well, and their third, and I just really like the Arctic Monkeys. But I think their first couple records are really similar to this one. And in fact, I think a lot of early 2000s indie rock is closer to this album than modern post-punk is. So I think this record actually probably influenced bands like The Strokes or like Interpol in some ways. I think it probably influenced the first Killers record. But yeah, I like this record. It's not my favorite Cure record. It's really late. I'm like kind of slurring my words and I shouldn't be, you know, it's midnight, but I don't know, I'm very tired, I guess. So thank you for watching. Expect more Cure videos, I guess. Have a nice night. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. I said that. Have a nice night. Bye. Thank you for watching. And have a nice night and goodbye and thank you for watching. Bye.